So, theologically speaking,
hello, and welcome to Theologically Speaking. I'm Kyle Leon Henderson.
and I'm Father Ian Elliott Davis.
Hello, Father.
Hello.
Here we are again. Today, we are talking about loving thy neighbor when thy neighbor is not good for us.
Right.
That seems to be something
It's difficult.
that's difficult. And, so we are called, I'll just say, we are called to love thy neighbor from the Bible, right?
Yes.
And what does that mean exactly, love thy neighbor?
It means caring for them, being concerned about them, being a good neighbor to them oneself, not causing them distress or anxiety.
And who's defined as thy neighbor?
Well, Jesus famously said a man was going from Jericho down to Jerusalem and was attacked on the road and was beaten up and was left for dead by the robbers. And a priest walked by on the other side of the road, and then somebody else walked by and walked by on the other side of the road, and finally a Samaritan walks up to the man and helps the man onto his donkey and takes him to an inn and dresses his wounds and says, everyone is your neighbor.
Everyone.
Everyone.
So our neighbor is literally, there's 7 billion people, 7.3
Right.
billion or whatever on this planet.
Right.
We're all neighbors.
We're
is that
all
what that means?
neighbors. This is a village, isn't
And
it?
I guess, that is, we're the human race, right? And that's our neighbors. So, so it's not going to look the same for because I don't know all
No.
7 billion people.
No. Neither do I, by the way.
I bet you know more than I do.
I don't know about
Well,
that.
I've lived in 3 cities. You've lived in 3 cities. So
Yes.
there you go.
Yeah.
We probably know the exact same amount.
Bigger cities each time
Exactly.
I moved to.
Right.
Yeah.
Me too. Well, no, I lived in New York. Now I'm here. So
right, yes.
my circle's getting smaller, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
More select.
more select. Well, the older I get, more select, and that's what we're talking about today. How do you get selective when you're a Christian?
Right.
And the neighbor part, like, how do you? Am I supposed to love my neighbor of who lives in Japan?
Well, it depends on whether you come into contact with them or not.
So if I don't come into contact,
then
they're not really my concern.
They're at a remove from
So
you.
it's just everybody I meet, everybody I see, everybody I
we have a
come in contact with.
responsibility to be good neighbors to everyone.
To everyone. And
Yeah.
what does it mean? Well, you said being a good neighbor is respecting them and treating them well and stuff. So it's just being, is it as simple as being kind and if you don't know
Thoughtful.
them, and thoughtful and such?
And generous, and would you cross the road to help them if they
Right.
were in danger or they were in trouble of any kind?
Right.
I see the most wonderfully selfless people in my life. I see people who are not selfish, but they are selfless. They will help even if it's to their own detriment sometimes.
Do you think people generally are a selfless kind of people? Or do you think they're selfish and we have to fight the instinct?
I think there are 2 types of people in the world. There are those who feed you and nourish you, and then there are those who drain you. Now, those are huge generalizations, but I think we all fall into one of those categories.
You think it is? It's probably nuanced and almost in a sort of a sliding scale. But
Right.
at the end of the day, if you're forced to, you can divide every person into
A feeder,
or a drainer.
or a drainer.
And
yeah.
at some point, the feeders can become the drainers if we're not careful, I
Yeah.
guess. Does our responsibility to be, quote unquote, a good neighbor change depending on how close an association we have with people?
I think inevitably, yes, the closer we are to someone, the more in proximity we are to people, then the more responsibility we have.
Right. So
towards
say
them.
my best friend, their house burns down. I have a responsibility. I've got an extra room. I have a
You
responsibility
can
to
offer
give that
extra
to them.
room.
But my next door neighbor, whom I've never met, it's still it wouldn't be being a bad neighbor to not let a stranger move into my house. Is that
It would.
I'm not going to
they're
let
all-
that stranger move into my house. Does that make me a bad neighbor?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
No.
That because I used like triple, quadruple negatives in that.
No, one has to be sensible, and if one is going to be a good neighbor to everyone, then one has to actually have a dividing line and say, well, I can do this and this and this,
Yeah.
but I cannot do everything for everyone all the time.
So I guess you could say, and I'm sort of inferring, I have an obligation to my neighbor whose house burned down, who I've never met, to try to do something.
Right.
Because, or if I have some extra clothes or if I have extra food, I need to go give it to them because I can.
Well, if you can, and if they need that, if that's helpful, it may not be helpful what you're imposing on them. There are all kinds of situation ethics that are at work there. So, yeah.
The person who presented this question to us this week, they wanted to know specifically about what do you do when a person that you are called to love is a toxic, and we've defined them, a drainer.
Right.
Someone who is causing you to stumble or causing you to not be your best self or causing you just trepidation. What do you do? Like, how are we supposed to navigate those relationships because we formed them, or can we, in Christian love, break those bonds and move along?
Sometimes breaking the bonds is the loving thing to do. One has to take that into account, that there is always the possibility that one lovingly and with care says, these are the boundaries of our relationship, and thus far but no further.
What does that look like if you come to the space where this person is a drainer, they are bringing influence to you that just doesn't sit well with you, or they come and they just always manipulate the conversation, manipulate the time, or anything you say, they sort of turn it around and make it a villainous thing.
So they're toxic.
They're toxic.
Right.
What me as a Christian, what am I to do with that? How do I actually step by step navigate my way out of that?
Well, not responding in like manner would be one good step to take, because our immediate reaction, if somebody is abusive to us or if somebody is mean to us, very often our first reaction is to be mean back, to hit out.
Yeah, that's a problem for me in life. I mirror energy. So if you're coming at me sweet, we're going to have a great conversation. But chances are, if you yell at me or scream or snap at me,
dear.
My first instinct will be to snap back. I've gotten very good about not, and I pray. And when I do, I pray through it. Like I stop and I meditate and take a deep breath and then acknowledge that moment of like, you just yelled at that lady in public because she was standing too close to you at the checkout line. So let's pray about it. I'm good at that, but that is hard to not mirror that energy.
Yes, it is. It's very difficult to not mirror that energy, but actually being generous and kind and hospitable even is a difficult option.
Right.
That's a difficult kind of path to follow.
So, okay, we're cutting the toxic person out of our life, and we check that off the box. They did a little toxic thing. They snapped. They twisted our words to something that we didn't mean, but we didn't meet that meet them where they're at. We
Right.
we maintained equilibrium. We breathed through it. We said a little prayer in our head. What's next?
Getting on with life and living out one's Christian discipleship.
Is it okay to here's one from last week's episode, or the last episode we did. You were asking me about terms that people are using nowadays. Ghosting is one.
Oh.
Is ghosting okay, or do we owe them an explanation as to why
What
we
is
are
ghosting? Explain
So
to me.
you and I are friends, or dating, or whatever, and I'm just not interested anymore. So I'm gonna leave you on red. You text me, and I'm just gonna read it and go about my day, not respond to you, and then eventually don't even read it.
That's horrid.
And you're ghosted out.
That's so mean.
Do you think it is? It's mean.
That is mean.
To me, I think. I don't know. This is me. This is probably bad. I don't know. Because you're horrified at the idea of ghosting. And I'm just like, to a certain degree, it's okay to me. Like if I just met you today at the park when we were
You're a
walking our
bad
dogs and we
person.
exchanged numbers, and you texted me 5 times in a row, being like obsessive about getting
Oh.
together already, and we've already done that. I'm just gonna kind of be
Oh.
like, you know what? I'm not gonna answer that anymore.
Yeah.
Is that a bad neighbor?
Oh, well, I
Or
wouldn't,
is it just kind to just be like, you know what? I don't owe you an explanation.
I
I'm
wouldn't
just
share
gonna,
my telephone number
I'm just gonna
with
get
a
out of
complete
there.
stranger anyway.
Well, I think there's a healthy level of ghosting that you can do. Somebody you
Right.
just met, whatever. That's my opinion.
Right.
But if we've been dating for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, a month, 2 years, whatever, and I just vanish,
That's not
that's
very,
not healthy.
That's not healthy. It's not very kind.
But can I ghost the person who I gave them my number at the park and then they went weird the first day? I can ghost them.
Yes.
That's
Yes,
that's just giving them a little context clue that I'm not interested, and let you figure it out for yourself.
It's hammering them over the head, I think, it's rather than giving them a little context clue.
Well, Jesus flipped tables when he needed to
Well,
make
he
a point,
did.
right?
He did.
I can hammer them over the
He
head with a
became
ghost.
angry.
But yeah, so ghosting people when they're toxic, is that appropriate, or do I need to sit you down and say, like, if we're just friends and you're just toxic, can I just kind of ghost my way out of it? Only see you at other parties, then never see you at all, kind of thing.
Well, I think some explanation would be good, wouldn't it? And to
Like an actual breakup, a friend breakup. needs
right
to
to
happen.
articulate that, look, you've hurt me in this way, or your behavior in such and such a way
Yeah.
is inappropriate. I think that's important.
I'll give you an example of me. I had 2 friends last year in 2020 that I had to break up with them because they were. I don't want to blame anything on them. They were a source of pain for me after my dad died, and they told me that I was expecting too much out of them as friends, and that I was expecting my people to bend over backwards for my grief. And there's a lot of nuances to why that's not true. And what I told them was, you might be right. I may be the dramatic one in this situation, but the way you're responding to my drama is causing me more drama in my own heart. So I need to just go away. I need to break ties.
Right.
You will always be met with, like, if you ever reach out to me again, it will be received warmly, but I need a clean break to get a fresh start.
Right.
And I never heard from them again. And I'm like, well, that's
that's
the Holy
sad.
Spirit. That's I didn't,
Yeah.
if they couldn't hear me, like, I acknowledge that I might have been the problem, but I need to, because I'm in this grief space. I'm frenetic. I can't, I'm in this cycle,
Right.
but I need you to go away because the way you're responding to me is not loving. It doesn't feel loving. And maybe you're taking care of yourself and whatever. But so I've done the friend breakup. It's
Right.
hard. I grieved
Yes.
that. Like, my partner was sort of concerned for me because I grieved the end of a friendship. I still to this day kind of wax poetically about how we used to be. And he's like, is that healthy? And I'm like, I don't know. But, so there needs to be a friend breakup, huh?
Yes. Well, and that's a kind of conciliatory attitude to have, to acknowledge that a friendship is breaking up, to come to terms with that, and always to remember, in many situations, there are the 5 steps of grief that we experience when something comes to an end, whether it be a job, a friendship, a relationship, a family member. There are all kinds of mixed emotions that jumble around each of us.
Yeah, I mean, I think I heard someone say that it's okay to cut people out of your life and then miss them. That's okay, because I think a lot of people feel like when you cut them out, it needs to be like a relief. Like it needs to be like a weight lifted. Like you
Right.
put the weight down, you always feel better than when you were holding a weight.
Right.
But I don't think that's the case. You can cut someone out and then miss them, right?
Yes, you
and
can.
that's hard. That's a hard space to be in. Mm-hmm. And is that Christian? If you miss them in your heart, is it Christian to?
It's human.
It's human?
It's very human, isn't it?
I think so. I think because I mean, I think you wish it could be better, but logically it's not.
Right.
And it's not healthy, right? Mm-hmm. Is it? But if we were to miss them and long for them, even though we've cut them out, should we try to? Is that an indication we should try to reconcile?
Reconcile,
reconcile, or is it an indication that that's just?
It could be. I try and view things from many perspectives. Whenever I see a situation, I try and see it from as many different angles as possible. Just to be fair and to try and see justice in a situation.
Do we have an obligation to try to be fair and see it from, as a Christian, and theologically speaking, do we have an obligation to try to see things from their perspective and try to see it from every angle, or can we be self-preserving? Or is that's short-sighted?
There's got to be a balance between those. We can't be entirely one or entirely the other. We have to have a balance between what is good and healthy for me and what is good and healthy for you.
Right.
And trying to find that balance is part of the wonder of being a human being made in the image of God.
The question I have now, though, is with what if the person is somebody we are sort of actually obliged to? Somebody we're actually, like, what if it's a family member, a sibling, or a parent? Like, the Bible actually tells us to love thy father and mother.
Honor thy father and mother.
Oh, that's right. Honor thy father and mother. So is honoring different from loving?
Well, there's respect in honor. And there are different forms of love. Of course, the love that one has for one's siblings is different from the love that one has for one's partner or one's parent,
right,
or one's pet animal.
I'm gonna convolute the hypothetical a little more. Say the parent can't keep a job, and is drinking and doing things that are harmful to themselves, and is always asking the child for money, is just irresponsible. Being an irresponsible parent, but the child is, say, of age, whatever.
Right.
What if there's somebody you can't respect? Like, how do you respect someone who's not being respectful to you? That
behavior is dishonoring one's grandparents, because one's parent who is drunk continually or asking for money continually or irresponsible is not honoring their parent.
What do you mean by that? Why is that situation not honoring their? Why is being irresponsible, asking your child or your offspring to fund your life and to do things that you're not willing to do for yourself? How is that not honoring their own parents?
Well, because to be truly honoring of one's parents, one would be responsible and act in a good fashion and a good manner towards one's own offspring.
You mean as a child of that parent, you owe it to them to be a responsible citizen because the parent brought you into this world, kind of thing? Is that?
It's getting a little convoluted.
It is
for
getting
me.
convoluted. Maybe I'm sometimes
It's over convoluted now.
Overcomplicating it, aren't I?
No, you're not overcomplicated, because it is complicated.
Mm-hmm.
It's very densely complicated.
Mm-hmm.
The direction of honor and love, and
Right.
and who is the child and who is the adult and who is the parent.
Yeah.
The child is always saying, give me, give me, give me.
Mm-hmm.
The parent is saying, no, no, no. But the adult says, sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I once said to my parents, honor thy father and thy mother, which, my parents said to me, honor thy father and thy mother. And I retorted, well, if you honored your father and mother, that means that you would respect me more, as well, because my grandparents loved me.
Oh, that's interesting. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah.
Well, so does that mean that we have to honor our father and mother as far as we can? Like, what I mean by that is, if they are toxic and they just can't, they don't provide anything for you in this relationship, does that mean that we're okay to cut them off because that is honoring them as far as we can?
Well, it depends on the situation, doesn't it? Because, I mean, one's parents care for one for a good deal of one's life, and then there may come a time where one has to care for one's own parent.
Right.
As they become older or infirm.
I guess I skipped over this portion of the question of, is it ever appropriate to cut off your parents, to just stop contact with them?
Again, it would depend on the situation.
But hypothetically, there are
occasions
where that is appropriate,
where it would be necessary. I would imagine, if they were abusive.
Do you think, say, a friend that we deemed needing to break up with and explain to them that this is not a healthy relationship, yada yada, do you think we have a responsibility to take more grief and more toxicity from someone like a parent than we would a friend because of that association?
I think blood blood relations are very important in our lives, and I think friendship, we can be friends with our parents as well, of course.
Right. So if blood is important, what about people in the LGBTQ community, there's a lot of people who've just been disowned by their family. Yeah. And it's harmful to knock on that door, I think.
Yes.
If they would rather you would be dead. That's something that we've heard in the South at times, especially, is it would have been simpler if you had died than to come out or to be different. So that's just not a healthy space. So what about people who create their own family out of friends?
Yes.
Do they still have an obligation to their blood family?
It would depend entirely on the situation, but yes, I acknowledge and think and affirm those families that we've created of our own volition and choice.
So do you think that choosing to disassociate with someone who you are close to, or that you feel to be toxic and to be a drainer, as you called them, do you think that can be anointed? That can be, the Holy Spirit can be present there in that decision to do to create a better, more healthy, more positive space for yourself?
Yes, the Holy Spirit moves in remarkable ways. Yeah.
Definitely. I feel like this is the easiest way to sort of navigate this conversation today is by hypotheticals. So forgive me for just continuing to give examples of people who I don't even know, but say you have cut someone off and it was necessary and you did that. Do you then have an obligation to be open to change and to re-evaluating that for the rest of your life? Or can you say, no, I've made my peace?
Well, I think optimism plays a large part in our decision making, and we should be optimistic about and expect the best of relationships, and not negative or see the bad all the time.
But couldn't it be exhausting to always have, say, your parent who you've prayerfully cut out of your life because of necessity, for them to then come back and say they've made a change and look like they've made a change, only to find out they haven't?
Right.
And then that is a pattern. Do you then have to always, sort of like the prodigal son, do we always have to have that situation? Or can we say, no, I've learned my lesson. I bless you, and you got to go. You can't come back.
Letting go is very difficult. Very, very difficult. And sometimes it's correct.
And godly sometimes.
And godly, the right thing to do. But those are rare occasions, thank goodness, I believe.
Yeah, that's something that, do you think, speaking of that, rare occasions, if you find yourself there, do you think you need to go to therapy or seek counsel from your priest or anything like that?
Yes, get professional advice and help and counsel. Yes, always.
Yeah. Well, I think that is... I think that this was sort of... I think I kind of knew where we were going to go with this one today, but this question was brought to us, and I'm glad it was, because, I don't know, I think we should all be more thoughtful about who we associate with if we have that choice.
Yes.
And to be thoughtful about who we don't associate with intentionally,
indeed.
Don't you think?
Yeah.
That's something good for all of us to think about, because our time is precious and our attention is limited, and my mother always told me, you are who your friends are, in a sense.
That's a good thing to say.
That's what I've always been taught, and so I think that's something that we could all just think about going as we navigate our life. Something before we leave was brought to our attention today, and I'd like to address it. Someone asked about a specific prayer we do in the Episcopal Church.
The Creed.
The Nicene Creed. In that, they say, Jesus will come back to judge both the quick and the dead.
Yes.
Somebody was confused about that terminology. Can we break that down a little bit?
Yes. Quick is simply an old-fashioned word for the living, those who are alive. So the quick and the dead is all humanity, everyone who's living and everyone who's departed this life.
And what is the root of that? Why do they say quick?
I don't know. I'd have to
or it's
look
just one of
that
those
up.
things. Why do
I'd
we
have
say
to look it up.
Why do we say the word thee or this or that? It's just a word they use, right?
Quick, I suppose.
And some versions of the prayer, they do say the living and the dead, don't they?
Yes, they do. Yes, in more modern versions.
It just happens to be that
it's got nothing to do with the quick of your fingernail.
Quick of the fingers, or the speed of which you walk this earth.
or speed. No.
Or speed at all, yeah. It's not quick or slow. The slow and the dead, and... the quick, the slow, and the dead. We should change that. That's what we should
quick,
say.
The slow, and the dead.
He'll judge the quick, the slow, the
dead,
dead,
and
or
the
snail.
Snail.
The snail from last episode. I just wanted to address that because someone had brought that up, and that's what this space is for. The questions for the priest, and this is the space we bring these questions to.
And I'm very happy to try and answer them.
I think you do a very good job. I think
that's very kind.
I think
Thank you.
As one of your parishioners, I
Thank
think
you.
we are lucky to have you, such a well-knowledged person. And this is, in fact, the last episode of 2021. So I just thought,
God bless.
God bless. And do you have any hopes for us as a humanity, us as your parishioners, us as Americans for 2022?
I'm hoping COVID is going to cease and desist and will disappear, but I'm not sure that that's going to happen very soon.
Maybe. Who's to say? I guess it's in God's hands, right?
Yes.
In God's
Yes.
hands and in the knowledge of the scientists. And we can be good stewards by believing science and praying to God, right?
Yes. Yeah.
There you are. Well, I'll let you have the last word for 2021.
Thank you to everyone, and God's blessing be with you all. Amen.
Theologically Speaking is a production of Church Nerds Productions. Executive producers for the show are Jeffrey Clark Tosca, Father Ian Elliott Davis, and Kyle Leon Henderson. Associate producer is Ed Tosca. Editors for the show are Kyle Leon Henderson and Jeffrey Clark Tosca. Music for this program is provided by Dr. Jeffrey Parola and the choir at St. Thomas the Apostle Hollywood. We would also like to give a special thanks to Louie for all the loving licks on the knee under the table while we produce this show. Visit St. Thomas the Apostle Hollywood Facebook page for more information on the show, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram at St. Thomas Hollywood.